Hello kids, welcome back to our YouTube channel. I'm Ms. Aruni. I will be covering your grade 10 business and accounting studies. Let's move towards our lesson today. Lesson number 5, the accounting equations. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to present the accounting equation, develop the accounting equation with external liabilities and when there are no external liabilities, as well as explain the situations where the equity change. So what is the accounting equation about? It is about the assets and the ownership of those assets. So the accounting equation will show you the assets and to whom the assets belong to, right? So simply, if the owner is the only person who is contributing to the assets will equal to the equity. But if there are external borrowings or funds taken from other parties other than the owner, which are taken to pay back, right? Just because we take another party, it does not become equity. If we are taking funds to pay back, නැවත ගෙවීම සඳහා අපි යම් මුදලක් අරගන්නව නම් ණයක් විදිහට අන්න ඒ වෙලට තමයි අපි යාලව liabilities විදිහට අරගන්නේ. So then assets will be equal to equity plus the liabilities. So there's always a golden rule for you to remember. That is, there are always two opposite reactions in this, right? Whenever one side increase, the other side will have a similar effect, right? I hope you could remember in science the Newton's third law. Every action has an equal but an opposite reaction. Similar way, all these equations have opposite reactions or else equal reactions at times. So then both sides should be able to be balanced, right? So both these sides should be definitely balancing. So what are the situations where equity changes? Right? We discussed before assets equals equity or assets equals equity plus liabilities, but there are occasions where the equity can change. Just as we described in our previous YouTube videos, due to the increase in incomes, our equity can change. So if we have an income, we add it to the equity. And if there are expenses, so if we pay for the expenses, we deduct it from the equity. And if the owner is giving us additional capital, yeah, you have to add it to the equity. While owner take funds from the business for his own personal use, we call that as drawings. We have to deduct that from the equity. So this is how the golden rule I said before is explained. Whenever assets increases or if something happens on the asset side, imagine it increases, we will record it as a debit. But if it is the equity or the liability side, if they increase, it will be a credit entry. So always the debit and the credit entries will be balancing our accounting equation. So we will always have a balance in this equation. Before moving to the accounting equation, there are two parties which you have to thoroughly know and understand about. That is the debtors of the business as well as the creditors of the business. Right? So when we discuss about the debtors are the people who buy goods from us on credit, right? So we are selling goods to that person on credit. Then he is the one owning money or owing money for us. අපි යාට ණයට බඩු දෙනවා. එයා අපිට සල්ලි දෙන්න. එහෙම නැත්නම් එයාට ණය පියවීම සඳහා බැඳීමක් තියෙනවා. එයා අපි වෙනුවෙන් අපෙන් ගත්ත භාණ්ඩවලට සරලන මුදල් ප්‍රමාණයක් නැවත ගෙවිය යුතුයි. අන්න එතකොට එයා අපේ debtor කෙනෙක් වෙනවා. Right? So imagine you sell goods worth 10,000 to Nimal on credit. Then what happens? We do not get cash 10,000, but we have a debtor who's going to pay us in future. So we create him or an account for him named as Nima. Right? So he is our debtor. And what will happen if we are the ones who are buying goods from credit? So if there are suppliers and we are buying goods from them or raw materials and other supplies with the intention of paying them in future, right? Without paying them at the moment of the transaction, we pay them in future. Then they are our creditors. So those who supply us goods on credit, we owe them money, so they are called as creditors. For example, the purchase of goods from Maya worth 10,000. So if the business is purchasing 10,000 worth of goods from Maya, right, then a creditor is created with the name of Maya. Lastly, I'm going to describe how the accounting equation is formed. So this is taken from your activity number 2 textbook. So you can see all the transactions. I have taken it, the same thing, right? If you want, you can pause the video and see how the dates are mentioned and how the transactions are mentioned. I have created the simple accounting equation here. Right? So this is Tisaru's business for the year. We mention it and then we mention the value. So I have developed assets equal liabilities plus equity equation, but you know under current assets you can expand this, non-current assets you can expand, current liabilities, non-current liabilities, such way you can expand. So if you want, or according to the question given in your exams, you can expand it. But whatsoever, always remember the total of assets should be equal to the total of this total or the sum of liabilities plus equity. Right? So let's see what this equation or the transactions are about and how we balance it. Our transaction number 1 done on January 1st is the owner investing capital worth 300,000. So there's a capital brought to the business 300,000. So then our cash increase, we record it as a debit entry. So the cash account is debited for 300,000, and then the equity account is also increasing. So it is credited for 300,000. So you can see that this is why I said that they have opposite reactions. Asset increase is a debit while equity increase is a credit. So it's balancing itself. Our next transaction is the purchase of goods worth 50,000. So if the question does not mention that it is bought on credit or a name is not given, we usually think or assume that this is done on cash, right? So if I go back to where the transactions was, it is said as purchase goods at rupees 50,000. So there's no name mentioned. So we assume that it is done on cash. So when we are buying goods, our goods increases. The goods in the business increases. So we have to debit 50,000 under the goods account or under the asset goods. And then since we pay cash to buy these goods, our cash reduces. So it is a credit entry, right? So what has happened? There's an increase in asset recorded under the current assets and a decrease in asset. The cash decreases, that is also recorded under the current asset. So here the effect is 0. Plus 50 and minus 50, there is no impact, right? So see, here also they have an opposite reaction. And next, paying rent. Paid rent 10,000 rupees. So when you pay rent, what happens? Your reducing your cash. So when an asset reduces, it is a credit value. So we put it as a deduction. That is why I have put all the deductions in brackets. So it is also an expense. So I said that if it is an expense, we have to deduct it from the equity. That is why under the equity, the expenses heading, I have debited 10,000, right? So reductions in equity are debited. Reduction in assets are credited. So here you can see there are two opposite reactions to balance the equation, right? Then let's go to the sale of goods. Let me show you the transaction given. January 13th sold goods which cost rupees 40,000 at rupees 60,000. So whenever this is given, you suddenly become confused. You don't have to be confused here. They say that the goods are costing 10,000. So the value of goods deduction will be, sorry, not 10,000, 40,000. The value of deduction is only 40,000, but the cash receipt is 60,000. Goods වලින් අඩු වෙන්නේ 40,000 අපේ අතට හම්බෙච්ච මුදල් ප්‍රමාණය 60,000. එහෙනම් තේරෙනවනේ 20,000 profit එකක් තියෙනවා කියලා. අන්න ඕකයි ඔයාලා තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ. ඔයාලා විභාගෙදි වගේ නම් මේ ළඟින් චුට්ටක් pencil එකකින් හරි pen එකකින් හරි ඔයාගේ question paper එකක ලියා ගන්න, so that at least put a bracket and write 20,000 for as income, so that when you're posting it to your accounting equation or to the ledger accounts, you can easily post all the transactions. So here it is, sales of goods worth 40,000 for rupees 60,000. So 40,000 worth goods are reduced from the business. It is a credit entry. Cash increases, a debit entry of 60,000. So you can see there's a difference of 20,000, an increment of current assets worth 20,000. So as asset or the cash, we get 20,000 more. It is considered as an income as well. So as income increases, we should add to the equity. So increase in equity is a credit transaction. So we credit 20, right? Or 20,000 here. So I hope all these four are clear to you. Next one is taking a bank loan worth 300,000. So if you go back to the question, obtained a bank loan of rupees 300,000. So if the time period is not mentioned, you can either assume if it is less than 1 lakh or 50,000, likewise, you can assume, you can put it under current liabilities. But if it is mentioned amount higher than that, or imagine that they have a time span more than 1 year, it definitely comes under the non-current liabilities. So there's no hard and fast rule except in the accounting equation, because we are considering how you are able to balance the accounting equation. At this part, your teachers will, the person who's marking your papers will not consider it in a rigid manner, but you have to be careful, right? So bank loan obtained 300,000. So our cash increases, our current asset increases. So that is a debit entry, as well as we have a new liability. So liability increase. So increase of liability is a credit. So we have a debit and a credit increment of the value of 300,000. Next, owner's telephone bill of rupees 10,000 is paid by the business. So it is not the business telephone bill, but the owner's, right? That is saying that owner has taken the business money to pay his expenditures. So it is considered as a drawing. So then what we should do, as cash is reduced, our current assets are reducing by 10,000. And as I said before, I hope you could remember this, drawings should be deducted from equity. You have to deduct that 10,000 from the equity, not from expenses, it is from the equity deducted as it is a drawing. So the 10,000 is deducted from here. So you can see both credit and debit entries are happening here as well. And next, receipt from debtors 30,000. But then now I have not, this is not made by me. This is your activity 2 in your textbook. So you can see there are no any credit sales given, but still there's a debtor, right? So imagine that there's a debtor who was there on the month of December, the last year, and that person paid us, right? So then what happens? We have to deduct 30,000 from the debtor name. එයා අපිට ණයක් දෙන්න හිටපු කෙනෙක් අපිට ආව deduct කරලා 30,000 දෙන්න හිටියේ ඒක අපිට receive වුණා. So our cash increases. Cash එක හම්බෙන්නේ, right? So our cash increases, it is a debit, and we have to deduct from the debtor because he has paid us, so it is a credit entry. So you can see it is on the same area of assets, right? Next one is paying bank loan interest. So when you're paying a loan interest, it is an expense to us. As cash is reduced, we put it as current assets. As cash is reduced, we put it as current assets are credit by 5,000. Then as it is an expenditure, our equity should be reduced. So we are debiting it with the value of 5,000 rupees. And our final transaction is paying the electricity bill. So then also our cash reduces by 5,000. And it is also an expense. So it is also reducing by 5,000 rupees, right? So that was the part we had to discuss today. After doing these entries, you have to be thorough to understand how you add. So I'm going to help you to find out a shortcut. So imagine rather than adding and deducting all these things, you can see areas which you can omit, right? Now see plus 50 and then minus 50. So the impact is 0. Plus 30 minus 30, impact is 0. But you have to be careful, don't jump, right? Don't jump from here to another place. Go one by one, right? So if I add the assets, 300, right? No impact here, but a reduction of 10, then it becomes 290. Here, a positive 20 is there, so it is 310. 310 plus 300, 610. 610 minus 10, what is it? 600,000. And then here also 30,000, no impact. But then 10,000, 5,000, 5,000 should be deducted. So 600 minus 10, it should be 590. So that is the total of our assets. So if this is the total, the liability and equities amount should be equal to this 590. So we have non-current liability 300, income 20, expenditures negative 20, and since we deducted drawings, the equity is 290, right? So if we add for the equity, we have to first consider the equity and then we can jump to the liabilities, right? Because it is given directly, but here you have to do a calculation even at the total. So 290 minus 20 plus 20, right? So here the impact is 0. So 290 plus 300, it is 590. So the assets value 590,000 equals to the summation or the sum of liabilities plus equity 590,000, right? So I hope you enjoyed learning with us and you got a clear idea. So see you next time. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.